Hi everyone. We're going to talk about cells that you find in your epidermis as well as the various strata or layers of the epidermis. So what does this guy have to do with anything here? This image is supposed to be representing one of the layers of your epidermis that helps you with waterproofing your skin. So just like this little guy needs a raincoat to keep him from getting waterlogged, well, your skin, your epidermis, your epidermal layer has a layer within it that does the same thing for you. Okay, so let's take a look at what we've got. So this is just a review. The skin itself has two layers, and we often mention a third layer that's not technically part of the skin. But the epidermis is the outermost or superficial portion of the skin, so that's the part we can see. It is composed of epithelial tissue. The deeper layer, so this is the epidermis up here. The dermis is the second layer down, and it's composed primarily of connective tissue. So deep to that is called the subcutaneous layer. Sometimes it's called the hypodermis, and it's not technically part of the skin, but it does have areolar and adipose tissue. So when we talk about subcutaneous fat, that's it right there. And so it's an area to store fat, and there's also blood vessels passing through and nerve endings in there that sense like deep pressure. So what we're going to focus on today is the epidermis. You're going to be covering the dermis on your own. All right, so chapter 5 is real straightforward. Not really a lot of explaining needed. But how many layers make up the skin? 2. Name the layers and the type of tissue that's made up of each, or that each is made of. You have the epidermis, which is made up of epithelial tissue, right? Epidermis, epithelial tissue. Then the dermis is made up of connective tissue. Okay, so we're going to look at, in this segment, the cells and then the layers. So your epidermis is made up of stratified squamous epithelium. And that makes sense because stratified means lots of layers, and that lends you protection. You certainly wouldn't want just one layer of cells in your epidermis, or you would rub up against the wall and your epidermis would be gone. So luckily we have lots and lots of layers, and it's squamous because the top layer here is flat. So it's avascular, so no blood vessels. So right now, take a look at your arm and take your fingernail and make a little scratch that leaves a little white mark. It doesn't bleed. You just went through the epidermis and not into the dermis. If it bled, that means you scraped too deep and you went into the dermis. So you've got 4 cells and then 4 or 5 layers, depending on where the skin is located. Okay, so the cells in the epidermis, the predominant ones, if you look back here, 90% of these cells are, it's really pronounced keratinocytes, but we're going to call them keratinocytes because that's going to help you remember they've got keratin. So keratinocytes are 90% of your cells, and here they are all over the place. So what's really important about keratin is it helps protect your skin and the underlying tissue from heat, microbes, and chemicals. So keratin is very protective. And the keratinocytes also have lamellar granules, which release a waterproof sealant in the outer layers of the skin. So when we thought about our little raincoat, you can think, keratinocytes have lamellar granules that helps the epidermis act like a raincoat. Okay, so about 8% of your cells are melanocytes. Where are they here? Let's see. Here's, why am I not seeing one? Okay. Am I missing it? Okay, there it is. Melanocyte. Okay, right, here it is. So you can see what's happening here. So melanocytes contain melanin, which is a pigment. And in this picture, it's showing how the nearby, this here and this here, is a keratinocyte. And it is picking up melanin from the melanocyte. So you see those little dots? Those are meant to represent melanin granules. So they, the melanin granules form a protective veil over the nucleus of other cells, like keratinocytes. So they shield other cells from damage to the DNA that might be the result of sun exposure. In the process, though, melanocytes can be damaged, and their own DNA gets damaged, and that's a type of skin cancer called malignant melanoma. So, the Langerhans cells, those are blood, those are derived from the blood, and they are, let's see, where are they here? Langerhans. They're for immunity, so they help protect you as well via immune responses. And then the last type of cell were the Merkel cell, and they're involved in the tactile sensation, or the sense of touch. And they attach, or they basically sit upon a Merkel disc, or tactile disc here, that is attached to a sensory neuron. So if you touch the epidermis and put light pressure on it, it will be picked up by the Merkel cell and the tactile disc and send a sensory signal to your brain. Hey, the epidermis was touched. Okay, so epidermis is made up of epithelial tissue. Don't forget to pause and quiz yourself. What are the 4 cells of the epidermis and a notable feature of each? Well, you've got keratinocytes. They're notable because they are the majority, 90%, and they are very protective of you, keeping out microbes and dirt and chemicals, and keeping keeping your body waterproof. Okay, another type of cell is a melanocyte, and they're notable because they have melanin, which protects other cells. The Langerhans cells is notable because it has the ability to launch an immune response. And then the last type of cell was the Merkel cell, and it's notable because it is touching a sensory structure called a Merkel disc. And therefore you can have the sense of touch within your epidermis. The most cells are the keratinocytes. Okay, the layers of the epidermis, there are 4 or 5 depending on where in your body and how much friction is at that particular part of your body. So from the deepest to the most superficial, these are the layers here. Okay, we'll take a picture. We'll look at a picture. All right, so this here is the outside of your body. So if you look down at your arm, this is what you're seeing, the very top layer of the epidermis. So what we're going to do is we're going to start at the bottom, talk about the base layer, and then go all the way up and talk about all 5 layers. Okay, so you want to know, keep in mind what's unique, what's interesting that's happening at each layer. And that's the type of thing that would be on the exam, is what's going on, what's interesting about that particular layer, what's important about its, function or its structure. Okay, so the stratum basale is also sometimes called stratum germinativum. So germinate means to make new. Like if you germinate plants, you're taking seeds from one plant and making new plants from that plant. So that means the stratum basale is a germinative layer. It's where you can have cell division. Let's see if we have, let me go back to this picture here because it's kind of nice. What's this little Easter egg looking thing? What the heck is that? That is a cell undergoing mitosis. So your germinative layer, your cells are undergoing mitosis because what happens is these cells divide, they push all the cells up this way, and so over the course of 2 to 4 weeks, the cells that were originally made down here in the base layer, in about 2 to 4 weeks, they're sloughed off at the surface, the outermost surface of your epidermis. Okay, so let me make sure I didn't skip anything here. Okay, so you have that base layer has keratinocytes, Merkel cells. Remember where the touch receptors are, and melanocytes. And you have stem cells dividing rapidly to make new cells. So something interesting about keratinocytes is that they have a cytoskeleton, just like all other cells, but their cytoskeleton has special intermediate filaments that will form keratin in the outer layers. So it's a cytoskeleton that's going to transform as it moves out and then become very protective. Okay, so cells in the base layer are attached to the bottom via what type of cell junction? Hemidesmosomes. And they're attached to each other via desmosomes, which were the spot weld type of cell junctions. So we already discussed why is it called stratum germinativum, because it's germinating or making new cells. So if you lose a significant portion of your base layer, can you make new epidermis? No, you can't. So that's where a skin graft might be necessary. So take a few minutes and read about the skin grafts, and I'm going to move on and talk about the next layer. So the stratum spinosum is the next layer up, and it's just called that because when you look at it under a microscope, the way they prepare the slides, the cells shrink. And so remember how you had cells originally being held together by desmosomes, and desmosomes are just spot welds. So there's just a little, let me see, I'll change the color here. They're just little spots here that are where the cells stick together. So anyway, if you can use your imagination and think if those cells shrink, where they're touching is going to look kind of spiny, like they're just touching each other at a little spiny area. So let's see, I don't think I can really do a good job drawing this. So this would be where there's a desmosome connecting to another cell, and this would be where there's another desmosome and another desmosome. So this would be a shrunken cell. So anyway, that's just why it gets its name. Spinosum means spiny, and it's just how it looks under the microscope. So something interesting that's happening at this layer is, well, it provides strength and flexibility to the epidermis, and also melanin is being taken in by nearby keratinocytes. So the keratinocytes are doing phagocytosis, right? They're eating melanin granules from the nearby melanocytes. So then all the keratinocytes will turn the color, that's determined by the melanin coming from your melanocytes. All right, so the next layer up is stratum granulosum. And this is a really important transitional layer because this is where your epidermal cells are dying. So it's a transition between dead cells up here and living cells down here. So living cells come up and then they start dying. And the type of death they die is called apoptosis. It looks like apoptosis, and that's actually another way you can say it. But apoptosis is programmed cell death. That means it's cell death that's supposed to happen. Your cells aren't supposed to be alive out here. They're supposed to be dead. So apoptosis, cells are supposed to die, and this is the layer where they die. So this is where you start to see lamellar granules that release the lipids that create the waterproofing of your epidermis. Stratum lucidum is only found on the fingertips and the palms of the hands and the soles of the feet. So you only have stratum lucidum in those places. On your, the inside of your elbow, you have no stratum lucidum. So basically, stratum lucidum is 3 to 5 layers of clear, flat, dead keratinocytes. Stratum corneum is the outermost layer of the epidermis. And again, it's the layer you see. So when you look at your skin, you're looking at the stratum corneum and the topmost layers of it. So at this point, the cells are basically just keratin. They're just keratin with lipids, and they're continually shed off of your body. So the advantage of having cells here that are just filled with keratin and surrounded by lipids is that they are a barrier to light somewhat, not perfectly, heat, water, chemicals you might be exposed to, and bacteria. These things you may not want to get into your body. So again, lamellar granules make this water repellent. This is the raincoat of your skin. So if you constantly expose this layer to friction, then you may end up with a callus. So if you've ever done a marathon and during the training you ended up with a callus, you can thank your stratum corneum for helping you make that callus. Okay, so something important to remember is that as the stem cells are dividing and producing keratinocytes, and as they're pushed up towards the surface, they fill with keratin. So that process is just called keratinization. So interestingly enough, when you strip away the outer layer of your epidermis, the cell division, the rate of cell division will pick up. So microdermabrasion is actually based on this principle here, that if you scrape away the top layers or abrade it away, then the bottom layers will divide more rapidly, the basal layer, stratum basale. All right, so dandruff is just excessive keratinized cell that's coming off your scalp. And it can be totally normal, or it can be the sign of an abnormality or a disorder. But just in general, dandruff is not a disorder. If it's associated with a skin condition, then it can be a sign of a disorder. Okay, so the layers of the epidermis, so make sure you stop and think. The 5 layers of the epidermis: basale, spinosum, granulosum, lucidum. Lucid means clear, and I put that in parentheses because not all skin has it, and corneum. Does all skin consist of these 5 layers? No, because lucidum is only found basically on the hands and feet. So we would say false. So I encourage you to make up a mnemonic device for these layers that can help you remember. So I didn't think of one in advance, but let's say you might say boys sniff girls like crazy. Anyway, it's really goofy. But anyway, if you make up a little way that you're going to help yourself remember the layers, then you're much more likely to remember it on an exam, because you're going to remember, okay, these are the layers. Boys sniff, girls like crazy. So you remember boys are at the bottom, which is really B is for basale, and that's where cell division occurs. So I'm just encouraging you to make up a mnemonic device that you will find memorable. And back to the layers, what exciting thing happens at each layer? Basale, cell division. Spinosum, phagocytosis of melanin granules by the keratinocytes. So that's bringing color into all the keratinocytes. Granulosum is where we start to have death occur at those cells. Lucidum, not really much happening there. It's a protective layer, just like the corneum is a protective layer. Okay, thanks for listening, and as always, if you have any questions, please ask. One thing too, not a lot of narrations for this chapter, so make sure to look at the PowerPoint to see all the sections that we did not discuss. It's all very straightforward, but using the PowerPoints as you're reviewing can help you, put the images together with the content, and it can serve as a good review for you. All right.